The Apostles' Creed. Where to begin? This is episode 0, episode -1. I'm not even sure how to number these because we really haven't even gotten into the 12 points of the Apostles' Creed yet. We're still looking at what is it as kind of a whole, the 30,000 foot level. So where to begin? I think we should begin as Presbyterians with the Book of Confession. So that is this book, and of course, when we say confession, the word confession has two definitions. The one that we're all familiar with that you see in movies and TVs, the one you think of the confession booth in the Catholic Church, confessing our sins or confessing guilt. Well, confession can also mean just a statement of proclamation, a statement of belief. And that is what this book is. It's not a list of all of our sins. It's not about guilt, although it does have theology of those things in here. So what is this book? Well, first of all, this book, it is a collection of 12 documents. There is the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed. Those are the two old ones. Then we have 6 documents from the Reformation era, including the Scots Confession, the Heidelberg Confession. You'll notice there's only 4 banners here. The one on the right, Westminster, that banner represents the 2 catechisms of the Westminster Confession and the Westminster Confession. And then we have the 4 newer confessions, including the Barmen Declaration. That's one of my favorite banners. I mean, just look at that. These are the theologians who stood up to Hitler. You got the Confession of 67, Belhar, and a brief statement of faith. Each of these 12 documents it's really their own unique and wonderful story. And of course, this is part 1. You can see that in really fine print. This is part 1 of the Constitution of the U.S.A. So where does the Apostles' Creed fit into all of this? It's the second document in this book. And it's actually in the book 3 times because in both Heidelberg Catechism and the Westminster Catechism, they include the full text of the Apostles' Creed. And of course, Heidelberg also has a bunch of questions about it, unpacking the theology of it. If you want to skip to the end of this video series, just read the Heidelberg Catechism. The Creed is short and sweet. It's the shortest of all the 12 in the book. And it's sort of like the minimum that Christians need to believe to be Christian. It was originally written in Latin, or was it Greek? Actually, it's kind of both. And the history of the Creed is really interesting. We'll get into that next week. All right, so this is the part of the video where we offer some criticisms. We're talking about the Book of Confessions. My only real criticism of this book is it's too long. It's too big. It's got some archaic language that's, just not up to date with modern readers. And the bigger it is, the more theology we cram into this book, then functionally the less useful it is and the less important it is to the average believer. I can't tell you how many Presbyterians don't even know what this is or get the Book of Confessions, assume it has to do with confession of sins. My other critique with this book is it's got some anti-Semitic stuff in here. It's got some anti-Muslim stuff in here. Some of the older confessions particularly don't embrace equality of men and women in leadership of the church that the U.S.A. does and has stood for a long time. So I think, I don't know how you handle those. They need to be taken out or need to be updated. I don't know. It's up to us as a denomination to decide. So in summary, this is the Book of Confessions. It's a very important document. In terms of importance, it's really second only to the Bible in terms of how important it is to what we believe and what we stand for. And then, of course, the Apostles' Creed is one of 12 documents in this book. All right, next week, we're going to talk about the history of the Apostles' Creed and have to do with, the fight that was settled by this creed. Really good stuff. See you next week. Book of Confessions, part 1 of our Constitution. This book does not get updated very often. This is a new version from 2016. That was the last time we changed it when we added Belhar. Here is the one from before that. This one goes back to the 90s. This was the version I used in seminary, and this includes the brief statement of faith. This is one that came to me from Al Myers. I found it in a collection of his books that he donated to the church. And this one only has 10 documents, so 10 out of the 12 that we see in the new one. It doesn't yet have Belhar, and this was from the 80s, so before the brief statement of faith was written. This was the first book of confessions from when the two churches merged. Pastor Kevin also found this little gem. This is one that dates back to the 50s, and this was the Book of Confessions of the Southern Presbyterian Church. It includes some, it's got the Apostles' Creed, it's got the two catechisms, it's got a confession, a statement of faith that's not in our current book. I thought this was really interesting. If anyone wants to explore that, I'd be happy to share it with them. So we've got our denomination, Presbyterian. We've been around legally as an entity since the 80s, although we were before that. There's the history I won't go into. And we have a constitution as an organization, and it's got part 1 and part 2. Part 1, that's our theology. This is the Book of Confessions, these 12 documents. And it's sort of like this book is second only to the Bible. This book does not get updated very often. The other part of our Constitution, you'll see that right there. This is the Book of Order. Look at that, part 2 of the Constitution of the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. This is the one we're all familiar with as good Presbyterians. This has got all the rules for what to do. It's got some good theology, which I've explored in some other videos. But this is mostly, how we govern ourselves as a church. Now, this book gets updated about every 2 years.
I've got, this is 2000, 2001, 2003, 4, 2004, 5, 5, 7, 7, 9, 11, 13. I don't even have all of them from the last 20 years up here. And they've been doing this since, for a long, long time. Since before I was born, they've had this Book of Order.
In fact, 2020 was the only year in which they didn't update the Book of Order, and that was because the General Assembly met by Zoom, and they just said, we're not going to deal with all of those constitutional amendments. Now, the Book of Confessions, part 1 of our Constitution, this book does not get updated.